There comes a point in a person's life when they start to sense that the world they see with their eyes is only a fragment of what is truly available. Something inside begins to whisper that abundance is not random, that prosperity is not a privilege reserved for a few, and that the feeling of limitation is often nothing more than a habit inherited from years of fear. It is in those silent moments of inner restlessness that many individuals throughout history stumbled upon spiritual truth, but Florence Scovel Shinn did not stumble. She studied it, lived it, embodied it. She understood that behind every visible experience there is an invisible blueprint, and she dedicated her life to helping people recognize that blueprint and use it consciously. Her teachings were simple in language, but immense in impact. She believed that every person, regardless of age, background, or personal history, could tune into a higher level of awareness, an awareness in which provision is natural and struggle is unnecessary. She often explained that the spiritual realm operates on laws as precise as the laws of physics. When someone aligns with those laws, the external world responds. And one of the teachings she treasured most was a short, powerful biblical passage that she considered a doorway into a deeper understanding of divine supply. This passage is not long, and many people rush over it without noticing the magnitude hidden in its structure. But Florence Scovel Shinn recognized that its power rested in a simple truth. The divine does not provide according to human limitation, but according to spiritual richness. She taught that the moment a person truly grasps this, their entire perception of money, opportunity, and provision shifts. It is not about hoping that something good might happen. It is about realizing that the source of all good is not confined to circumstances, careers, or the opinions of other people. The source is infinite, and the channels are many. To visualize what she meant, imagine a vast sky pouring sunlight in all directions. The sun does not choose who deserves light. It shines because shining is its nature. If someone closes their curtains, the light doesn't disappear, it simply cannot enter the room. In the same way, Florence said that abundance is always shining, always flowing, always ready to fill whatever space the mind opens. But when someone's inner world is filled with doubt, fear of loss, or the belief that there is never enough, it is as if they are living behind heavy curtains. The supply still exists. What changes is the person's capacity to receive it. Her perspective on supply was revolutionary because she refused to let people believe that money itself is the cause of prosperity. To her, money was only the evidence of an inner state, a symbol of consciousness made visible. She compared it to a physical shadow. The shadow cannot change unless the object casting it changes first. In the same way, she insisted that no financial situation permanently changes unless the inner beliefs shift first. And this is where most people misunderstand prosperity. They try to fix the shadow instead of the substance. They try to fix the result instead of the cause. Florence urged her students to work at the level of thought, conviction, and spiritual connection, because that is where true transformation begins. She emphasized that every person must redefine where their trust lies. Many rely on their job, their savings, a partner, or a temporary opportunity, believing these things to be their true source. But Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the moment a person transfers their sense of security to something outside themselves, they create vulnerability. External conditions can change overnight, but the spiritual source she spoke of does not fluctuate, does not weaken, and does not run out. When a person realizes that channels are interchangeable but the source is constant, fear begins to melt away like ice under the sun. What she offered the world was not just theory. It was a method of living. She showed people how to activate prosperity through a combination of words, imagination, and emotional alignment. She insisted that a person's words are creative tools, precise instruments that shape their internal climate. If someone speaks scarcity, they feel scarcity. If they speak abundance, they begin to vibrate with abundance. Florence described this as tuning a radio. You cannot hear a station you are not tuned into. In the same way, you cannot receive the frequency of prosperity while broadcasting fear. Another key idea she taught was the importance of emotional consistency. A person can speak positive words all day but still create internal resistance if their emotional tone contradicts their declarations. Florence said that the subconscious mind listens to feelings more than sentences. If someone says, "I am provided for," while secretly feeling anxious and unsupported, the subconscious hears the anxiety, not the statement. This is why she urged people to cultivate calmness, trust, and the feeling of being cared for. She believed that abundance flows naturally to a relaxed heart. She also helped people recognize how many of their beliefs were inherited. Many grew up hearing phrases like, "Money is hard to get," "Life is unfair," "Opportunities only come for some people." These ideas become seeds planted in the subconscious, and even decades later, they still influence behavior and expectation. Florence Scovel Shinn encouraged her students to uproot these old seeds and replace them with new ones. Ideas of sufficiency, possibility, and spiritual backing. She insisted that the universe responds not to a person's past, but to their present consciousness. People often asked her why some individuals experience sudden breakthroughs while others wait longer. Florence explained that spiritual law responds instantly, but human consciousness sometimes takes time to adjust. Imagine trying to turn a ship in the ocean. The moment the wheel is turned, the direction changes, but the physical movement takes a little while to reflect the shift. Prosperity works the same way. The moment the mind aligns with abundance, the shift has already begun in the unseen realm. What appears as waiting is often just the external world rearranging itself to match the new inner condition. Florence Scovel Shinn witnessed countless transformations. Individuals who went from deep financial distress to stability, from fear to confidence, from lack to unexpected provision. She never attributed these results to luck. She called them demonstrations, evidence that the spiritual law always responds when someone aligns with it consistently. She believed that anyone at any age could experience this shift once they learned the inner mechanics of abundance. Florence Scovel Shinn often said that the greatest shift a person can experience is the moment they understand that divine supply does not respond to desperation, but to recognition. Recognition of one's spiritual identity. Recognition of one's connection to the infinite. Recognition that the universe is not withholding anything. It is waiting for permission to flow. She explained that for many people, the greatest obstacle to abundance is not external hardship but internal misalignment, a thought pattern that unintentionally shuts the door to possibility. People who are constantly preparing themselves for disappointment create a mental atmosphere that cannot sustain prosperity, just as a cracked vessel cannot hold water. So the first step toward true abundance, she insisted, is the willingness to believe that provision is natural, not extraordinary. What makes this teaching so powerful is that it removes the weight of proving oneself. Florence knew that countless individuals carry invisible burdens. The fear of not deserving wealth, the guilt of wanting a better life, or the belief that abundance only comes through exhausting struggle. She dismantled these ideas gently, explaining that prosperity is not a reward, it is a reflection of how aligned a person is with the truth of their own worth. She would tell her students that the divine never measures someone by human standards. While society assigns value based on success or failure, the spiritual realm sees every person as inherently connected to infinite good. And when someone finally internalizes this, their relationship with material resources begins to transform. Money no longer feels like something to chase, but something that gravitates naturally toward a mind that expects support rather than hardship. To illustrate this, imagine a garden where seeds fall into two types of soil. One is dry, compacted, and unable to receive. The other is rich, open, and ready. The seeds are the same, but their outcomes differ entirely based on the environment they enter. Florence Scovel Shinn said that life works exactly like that. Opportunity, inspiration, intuition, and unexpected blessings are constantly dropping into the field of your mind. If the soil is hardened by fear or the expectation of failure, the seeds cannot grow. But if the soil is open, softened by trust and receptive expectation, the seeds take root quickly. She emphasized that spiritual abundance requires emotional agreement. The mind must say yes, but the heart must say yes as well. Another principle she taught is the importance of dropping resistance, not by force, but by shifting the focus. Most people try to overcome scarcity by worrying more, planning harder, or repeating affirmations mechanically while still feeling constricted inside. Florence called this mental strain ineffective because it reinforces the belief that abundance is far away. Instead, she said the path to prosperity should feel natural, peaceful, and grounded. Abundance comes through alignment, not pressure. She encouraged people to speak words that feel true enough to soften the mind rather than shock it with unrealistic claims. Rather than declaring, "I am wealthy right now," if that feels false, one might begin with, "I am learning to open to new forms of supply," or "I am willing to release my fear around money." The inner shift begins with honesty, not pretense. Florence Scovel Shinn also explained that abundance responds to clarity. A mind filled with confusion, contradictory desires, and self-doubt sends mixed signals to the subconscious, which then reproduces mixed results. She taught that a person must decide what they truly want, not based on fear, but on genuine desire. Many individuals want prosperity not for joy, but to escape something, to escape stress, debt, embarrassment, or instability. But Florence taught that desire rooted in fear has unstable foundations. True abundance blooms when a person allows themselves to want something because it expands their life, not because it saves them from it. This shift in motivation changes everything. It turns prosperity into a harmonious expression of inner truth, rather than a survival mechanism. She often described the subconscious mind as a loyal servant that obeys whatever emotion is dominant. If fear is dominant, the subconscious prepares the person for experiences that match fear. If trust is dominant, it prepares experiences that match trust. This is why Florence insisted that the emotional tone behind one's thoughts matters even more than the words themselves. She encouraged individuals to cultivate peace intentionally, to practice breathing deeply, to imagine themselves surrounded by a field of safety, to repeat words that activate calmness before repeating words that activate abundance. In her view, peace is the doorway, abundance is the room on the other side. Florence Scovel Shinn understood that many people live on the edge of emotional exhaustion, constantly trying to hold life together through sheer effort. She taught that this is unnecessary. She said that effort rooted in fear does not produce abundance. It produces depletion. True prosperity arises from alignment with inner truth and the quiet certainty that one is supported by something far greater than circumstance. She encouraged individuals to rest spiritually, not by becoming passive, but by releasing the belief that everything depends on them alone. When someone realizes they are not the sole architect of their experience but a co-creator with the divine, a deep relief enters the heart. And relief opens space for abundance to enter. She gave countless examples of people who transformed their circumstances simply by shifting inward. People who were overlooked suddenly received opportunities. People who feared loss began to receive unexpected solutions. People who felt trapped discovered new paths that seemed to appear out of thin air. She insisted these were not miracles in the traditional sense. They were demonstrations, the natural outcome of someone reconnecting with the spiritual laws she taught. Florence often repeated that abundance is not something you pursue like a distant dream. It is something you allow. Allowing is the art of cooperation with the divine. It is the willingness to walk through life with a sense of safety rather than fear, with trust rather than suspicion, with openness rather than contraction. And when someone learns to live in that posture, life responds generously. Now, before we continue deepening these insights, take a moment, just a moment, to breathe. If what you've heard so far resonates with you, if you feel that something inside you has been waiting to hear these truths expressed in this way, I'd like to invite you into a simple gesture that helps this message reach more people who need it. If you're finding value in what you're hearing, consider subscribing to the channel. Not because it's routine, but because it connects you with a community of people exploring the same spiritual principles you are. And I'd love to hear something personal from you. Something real. Leave a comment telling me one belief about money or abundance that you are ready to release. Say it in your own words. Say it with intention. You might be surprised at how powerful that single act of self-honesty can be. Florence Scovel Shinn believed that one of the greatest misunderstandings about prosperity is the assumption that it arrives from the outside first. She explained that material shifts are the final stage of a process that begins quietly and invisibly within a person's inner world. A change of mood, a change of perspective, a change of belief. These are the early movements of abundance long before the evidence appears. To her, everything is created twice. Once in the mind and once in the material world. The outer result is simply the mirror. And what the mirror reflects is always the consciousness that stands before it. She often described the human mind as a doorway between two worlds, the spiritual and the material. When the doorway is open and uncluttered, ideas, opportunities, and resources flow naturally. But when it becomes crowded with old fears, resentments, or rehearsed stories of disappointment, the passage becomes narrow. Not blocked, never fully blocked, but restricted. This is why she placed so much emphasis on mental cleansing. Releasing old narratives is not a luxury. It is a requirement for the circulation of abundance. Florence encouraged her students to become detectives of their own thinking, to notice every time they said something like, "Things never work out for me," or "Money is always stressful," or "I always fall behind." She taught that these phrases are not harmless. They are commands issued to the subconscious. And the subconscious fulfills them faithfully. To illustrate this principle, imagine someone walking through life carrying a heavy backpack without realizing it. They wonder why they feel tired, why progress feels slow, why opportunities slip through their fingers. Then one day someone tells them to open the backpack, and inside they find handfuls of beliefs that were never theirs to begin with. Beliefs inherited from parents, absorbed from teachers, picked up from the environment, or shaped by painful moments from years ago. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that abundance begins when a person starts removing these unnecessary burdens. Not through denial, but through awareness. Awareness dissolves what repression maintains. The moment someone becomes conscious of a limiting belief, the belief loses its power. Florence also placed great importance on the emotional atmosphere in which a person lives. She insisted that emotions are indicators of alignment. Joy signals openness. Peace signals trust. Anxiety signals constriction. Resentment signals an unresolved energetic blockage. She reminded her students that the subconscious interprets emotions as instructions. If someone worries constantly about bills, the subconscious interprets that feeling as a request to prepare for more lack. If someone habitually feels grateful even for small things, the subconscious interprets gratitude as the signal that the person is ready to receive more. Florence believed that gratitude was not merely a polite attitude, but a magnetic force that draws provision toward the grateful heart. She explained that gratitude must be genuine, not performative. Forced gratitude, phrases repeated without emotional resonance, does not shift consciousness. But authentic gratitude, the kind that softens the chest and brings warmth into the body, has tremendous power. She suggested that students cultivate gratitude not only for what they already have, but for the unseen good that is already heading their way. She called this spiritual anticipation, a state in which someone knows that blessings are already in motion even before they become visible. This state dissolves fear and activates trust at a deep level. Another crucial lesson Florence Scovel Shinn taught is that abundance is relational. It cannot be sustained in a mind filled with judgment, resentment, or envy. She explained that these emotions place a person in a vibrational posture that contradicts prosperity. When someone envies another person's success, they are telling their subconscious that success belongs to others, not to them. When someone resents wealthy individuals, they are subconsciously pushing wealth away. Florence encouraged her students to bless the prosperity of others because doing so affirms that abundance is not limited to a select few. She used to say that blessing another person's good is the same as watering the soil of your own garden. It expands your capacity to receive. She also warned that abundance cannot coexist with chronic self-criticism. Many people diminish their own worth without realizing that each self-critical thought is a subtle form of telling the subconscious, "I am undeserving." Florence taught that self-respect is a spiritual tool. Not arrogance, not superiority, but a calm, steady recognition of one's divine identity. She encouraged students to speak to themselves with the same kindness they would use with a child learning to walk. She believed that self-compassion opens the deepest channels of prosperity because it aligns someone with the truth that they are worthy of the good they seek. Florence's teachings became even more transformative when she introduced the concept of inner assumption. Assumption, to her, was not pretending or denying reality. It was choosing the emotional and mental state that matched the life one wished to experience. She explained that the subconscious mind responds to feeling, not logic. If someone assumes the feeling of being supported, they begin to walk, speak, and make decisions differently. If someone assumes the feeling of being financially stable, they no longer cling to fear-based choices. They become receptive, intuitive, confident, and the outer world eventually adapts to match that inner shift. To understand this better, picture an actor preparing to play a role. The actor must step into the character emotionally before they can express it physically. Florence Scovel Shinn said that abundance works the same way. Before a person can live a prosperous life, they must feel prosperous internally, not by forcing emotion but by practicing the sensation of relief, trust, or expansion. These are the emotional signatures of abundance. She also emphasized that the universe responds quickly to clarity and consistency. Not perfection, but consistency. A person who declares abundance once and then spends the rest of the day worrying interferes with their own process. But someone who repeatedly, gently, brings their mind back to trust begins to build a stable emotional foundation. Florence believed that repetition is not mechanical. It is alchemical. Each time a person returns to the feeling of safety or gratitude, they reinforce a new mental reality, and over time the old patterns weaken until they eventually dissolve. At this stage, she often guided her students toward a deeper recognition that abundance is not an achievement. It is an inheritance. It is something one remembers, not something one earns. She described the divine as a constant, overflowing fountain and taught that every person is connected to it whether they realize it or not. The work is not to create abundance but to remove the blocks to recognizing that it has always been available. This understanding becomes the doorway through which the most powerful declarations gain their effectiveness. When a person repeats a spiritual truth from a place of alignment rather than fear, the subconscious receives it as reality, not hope. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that this is why certain affirmations or prayers, when spoken with genuine inner conviction, produce results that seem almost immediate. It is not the words alone but the emotional agreement behind them that sets spiritual law into motion. Before we enter the deeper spiritual declaration in the next movement of this teaching, pause for a brief moment. Allow yourself to notice what part of your heart feels more open now than when you began listening. Even the smallest shift in perception is evidence that something within you is awakening, something old is loosening, something new is forming. Florence Scovel Shinn believed that one of the greatest spiritual breakthroughs occurs when a person discovers that abundance responds to inner conviction rather than outer conditions. She taught that prosperity is not created through force or struggle but through a subtle shift in consciousness. A shift that begins when someone decides to see themselves not as a seeker of supply, but as a rightful heir to divine provision. According to her, this shift is not arrogance. It is remembrance. Remembrance of the truth that every soul is connected to a limitless source, even when the world tries to convince them otherwise. And in her teachings, the most powerful way to remember is through the use of spiritual declarations spoken with certainty. She explained that the spoken word carries a kind of creative electricity. Words are not mere sounds but instruments that activate the subconscious mind, and the subconscious mind, in turn, shapes the person's external experiences. Many people speak words of fear throughout the day without realizing their impact. They say things like money is tight, things never work out for me, or I can't afford that, and each phrase repeated often becomes a mold that the subconscious diligently fills. Florence would gently remind her students that the universe is always listening, not judgmentally, but creatively. Whatever you affirm with emotional weight becomes a seed planted in the fertile soil of your inner life. Whether the seed grows into abundance or limitation depends on what you repeatedly declare. This is why Florence Scovel Shinn placed so much emphasis on spiritual affirmations that are spoken with gratitude. Gratitude is a frequency that dissolves fear, and when a declaration is made from a place of gratitude, it carries a completely different vibrational signature. Instead of saying, I need, which communicates lack, she taught people to say, I receive, which communicates readiness. Instead of asking for help with anxiety, she encouraged them to affirm with confidence that divine provision is already underway. In her view, the universe does not respond to begging. It responds to recognition. It responds to the inner state of someone who feels aligned with abundance even if, at that moment, their physical circumstances have not yet caught up. One of her most transformative teachings was that the spiritual realm responds instantly, but material reality sometimes takes time to reorganize itself. She compared this to planting a seed. The moment you plant it, the process of growth has already begun, even though the soil appears unchanged. Days may pass before a sprout emerges, but the unseen work beneath the surface is active and alive. In the same way, when a person aligns their consciousness with divine supply, through words, feelings, and a calm expectation, the manifestation begins immediately in the invisible. What appears as waiting is merely the external reconfiguring itself to match the internal. Florence Scovel Shinn understood that for many people, the greatest challenge is maintaining the vibration of abundance while their outer world still reflects scarcity. This is where emotional discipline becomes essential. She taught that emotional discipline does not mean suppressing feelings, pretending to be positive, or denying difficult circumstances. Instead, it means choosing which emotions to energize and which to release. A fleeting moment of fear is normal. Dwelling in it is optional. She encouraged people to acknowledge their feelings honestly and then gently redirect their focus toward trust, certainty, and gratitude. This redirection is not done once. It becomes a daily practice, a mental hygiene routine that gradually reshapes the subconscious patterns rooted in fear. To help her students create that emotional consistency, Florence often recommended visualization, not as fantasy, but as a spiritual rehearsal. She said that the subconscious mind responds vividly to imagery, especially to imagery that is paired with feeling. Visualizing oneself as supported, peaceful, provided for, and surrounded by divine order is not escapism. It is preparation. It is training the subconscious to expect abundance rather than uncertainty. Imagine someone who sees themselves receiving good news, experiencing relief, feeling financial ease, or walking through life with quiet confidence. That inner image becomes a signal broadcasted into the spiritual realm, and the spiritual realm mirrors it. Visualization, then, becomes a companion to spoken declarations, each strengthening the other in a harmonious loop. Another essential part of Florence Scovel Shinn's work was the concept of divine timing. She taught that manifestations occur at the right moment and in the right way. Not earlier, not later, but at the perfect intersection where spiritual alignment meets material readiness. Many people become anxious when results don't appear instantly, believing nothing is happening. But she insisted that divine timing is not delay. It is precision. There are moments when receiving something too early would create pressure, confusion, or chaos. The universe arranges events with a wisdom that sees further than human logic. She encouraged her students to trust the timing, trust the unfolding, and trust that the universe is wiser than their fears. Florence also highlighted the importance of releasing control over how abundance arrives. Many people believe that prosperity can come only through one specific path: a job, a business, a raise, a sale, a particular opportunity. But when a person becomes fixated on one channel, they unconsciously block all others. Florence taught that the divine has countless avenues through which supply can flow, including some entirely unexpected. She would often say that the moment you let go of your limited idea of how God should deliver your blessings, the universe gains the freedom to surprise you. Her students frequently shared stories of provision that arrived through channels they could never have predicted. A forgotten refund, a sudden opportunity, a gift, a change in circumstances that opened new doors, or an intuitive idea that led to financial improvement. One of her core teachings was that provision is not always monetary. Sometimes the universe provides wisdom, clarity, guidance, or protection before providing money. For example, someone might be given insight into a better financial decision, or they might be guided away from a costly mistake, or they may meet someone who becomes a catalyst in their journey. Florence Scovel Shinn emphasized that the universe does not always send money first, it sends alignment. And when alignment becomes strong enough, the material equivalent arrives naturally. She encouraged individuals to see every small sign of improvement as evidence that the manifestation is taking shape. A moment of relief, an unexpected compliment, a new idea, a shift in mood, a sense of peace. All these are early signs that the subconscious is changing. And once the subconscious changes, the external world must follow. It has no choice. The outer world is an obedient reflection of the inner. Florence taught that abundance becomes inevitable for anyone who maintains alignment through thoughts, words, and emotional consistency. She believed that once someone truly understands their connection to divine supply, fear loses its power. Scarcity becomes an old story that no longer fits. And in its place grows a quiet confidence, a confidence rooted not in the world, but in spiritual truth. Florence Scovel Shinn often explained that a person's relationship with abundance is shaped long before money ever enters the picture. It begins with the subtle assumptions they carry about life itself. Do they believe the world is supportive or indifferent? Do they expect things to work out or to fall apart? Do they naturally anticipate solution or struggle? These questions may seem philosophical, but she insisted they were profoundly practical. The universe, she said, mirrors the tone of your expectations, not merely the content of your requests. Someone can say they want prosperity, but if they walk through life assuming disappointment is inevitable, that assumption becomes the blueprint. What shows up in their experience is not evidence of fate, but evidence of expectation reinforced over years. For Florence, the key was teaching people to elevate their expectations without denying their current reality. She never encouraged people to pretend their circumstances were different or to ignore challenges. Instead, she taught them to acknowledge the challenge and then declare a higher truth over it. She believed that this was the real meaning of spiritual authority, the power to speak from the level of truth rather than the level of fear. When someone declares, "I am guided," even while facing uncertainty, they begin to align themselves with guidance. When they affirm, "Everything I need is already on its way," they activate a vibration of readiness rather than desperation. And that readiness becomes the magnet through which solutions are drawn to them. One of her teachings that often surprised her students was that abundance flows most easily when a person stops trying to earn it emotionally. Many people carry guilt around receiving. Guilt about wanting more, guilt about outgrowing old patterns, guilt about succeeding where others have struggled. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that guilt is a form of resistance, a silent declaration that says, "I am unworthy of good things." She reminded people that the divine does not withhold blessings reluctantly. Blessings are the natural expression of an infinite source. The only thing that interrupts the flow is the person's own sense of unworthiness. She encouraged her students to release guilt the moment it appeared, replacing it with the understanding that they are not taking abundance from others but aligning with a well that cannot run dry. She also emphasized the importance of emotional neutrality, a calm, balanced state in which a person is not trying to force abundance but is simply prepared to receive it. She explained that neediness carries a disruptive vibration. It communicates that something is missing and strengthens the sense of scarcity in the subconscious. But neutrality opens a gentle space where the subconscious becomes receptive. Florence compared it to water. When water is calm, it reflects the sky perfectly. When agitated, it distorts everything it touches. The calm mind receives spiritual truth clearly. The agitated mind cannot recognize opportunities even when they appear. This is why she encouraged people to build small practices throughout the day that restore inner calm. A simple breath, a short affirmation, a pause before reacting, or a brief visualization of light entering the mind. These are the micro moments that realign consciousness. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that prosperity is sustained through these small acts of consistency, not through dramatic rituals. She said that alignment is not a single event but a daily rhythm, a gentle guiding of the mind back toward trust again and again. With time, these small acts accumulate and form a new psychological baseline, one that naturally attracts better circumstances. Florence Scovel Shinn also taught that abundance naturally flows toward individuals who have learned to release emotional resistance. Resistance is subtle. It may appear as the habit of expecting disappointment, the fear of taking risks, or the belief that others are more deserving of success. These patterns are often invisible during the day because the conscious mind stays busy. But at night, when the mind becomes extremely honest, these fears surface quietly. The night declaration gradually dissolves this resistance by replacing fear-based thoughts with statements rooted in trust and truth. Over time, the subconscious grows accustomed to these new instructions and begins rejecting fear automatically. What once felt like a heavy weight begins lifting, allowing abundance to enter more freely. She believed that the night declaration should be personalized to reflect the deepest desires of the heart. No one else can choose the perfect phrase because the subconscious responds most strongly to words that feel emotionally true for the individual. For one person, a declaration centered on divine support may feel powerful. For another, a declaration about receiving opportunities with ease may resonate more deeply. Florence Scovel Shinn encouraged people to notice the subtle emotional reaction they feel when they speak a certain phrase. If the phrase causes a sense of peace, warmth, or confidence, that is the subconscious signaling resonance. That is the phrase to use. She also emphasized that sincerity is more important than eloquence. A declaration spoken simply, without elaborate vocabulary, can penetrate deeply as long as it is spoken with feeling. The subconscious is moved by authenticity, not decoration. Many students reported that their most effective declarations were short sentences spoken gently but with unwavering faith. This simplicity allows the mind to relax rather than strain. The subconscious does not need poetic structure. It needs emotional truth. Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the universe always responds to sincerity because sincerity reflects alignment between heart and intention. As people continue practicing the night declaration, they often realize that the most significant transformation is not the material abundance they receive, but the person they become in the process. Someone who once feared uncertainty begins trusting the unfolding of life. Someone who once carried self-doubt begins recognizing their own worth. Someone who once lived in survival mode begins experiencing inner peace as their default state. Florence Scovel Shinn believed that abundance is the natural expression of a mind that feels secure, loved, guided, and supported. The night declaration nurtures these emotional foundations, allowing abundance to grow organically from within. One of the most empowering effects of the night declaration is the sense of inner companionship it creates. People often fall asleep feeling alone with their fears, but Florence Scovel Shinn taught that speaking a declaration reminds the subconscious that divine support is always present. This creates a sense of partnership with the universe, a feeling that one is not navigating life alone. Over time, this companionship becomes a deep internal knowing, a quiet certainty that guidance is always available. This sense of partnership alters the way a person interprets life. Challenges no longer feel like punishments, but stepping stones. Delays no longer feel like failures, but preparation. Another dimension of her teaching is the idea that abundance expands as a person expands. When someone practices the night declaration, they begin developing courage to pursue opportunities they once avoided. They become more receptive to new ideas, more open to growth, more willing to take inspired action. Their inner transformation unlocks external possibilities because they no longer limit themselves through fear or hesitation. Florence Scovel Shinn believed that abundance responds to readiness, and readiness is cultivated through nightly alignment. She also encouraged individuals to maintain emotional consistency throughout the day, even if imperfectly. A person doesn't need to maintain perfect positivity. They simply need to avoid contradicting their declaration with persistent negativity. If fear arises during the day, they can pause briefly, breathe, and remember the truth they spoke before sleep. This small gesture keeps the subconscious anchored. It prevents the person from undoing the progress they made during the night. Consistency does not require rigidity. It requires intention. Ultimately, Florence Scovel Shinn taught that the night declaration is a gift a person gives to their future self. Every night becomes an investment in the emotional, spiritual, and material experiences of tomorrow. Each declaration plants a seed that grows while the body rests. Each repetition strengthens belief. And each morning becomes a new beginning shaped by the confidence spoken the night before. Over time, life becomes less about reacting to circumstances and more about designing them from within. Before we close, if this message brought clarity or sparked something meaningful inside you, consider subscribing to the channel so you can receive more teachings inspired by Florence Scovel Shinn. And I would love to hear from you. Share in the comments a moment when you felt guided or supported in a surprising way. Your story may become the encouragement someone else needs to start their own nightly transformation. She also emphasized the importance of speaking to yourself with dignity. Many people carry an internal dialogue that is harsh, critical, or dismissive. Florence taught that this inner voice becomes the emotional climate in which your life grows. If the inner voice is cruel, the subconscious shrinks. If the inner voice is respectful, the subconscious expands. She told her students to speak to themselves the way the divine speaks to their spirit, gently, confidently, lovingly. She believed that self-respect is an unspoken magnet for abundance because it communicates to the universe that you recognize your worth. And when you recognize your worth, life responds with experiences that match that recognition. Another essential part of her teaching is the practice of gratitude, not as a forced habit, but as a genuine recognition of how supported you truly are. Gratitude, she said, is not the reward for receiving abundance. It is the doorway through which abundance enters. A grateful heart vibrates at a frequency that welcomes more. It is not blind positivity. It is awareness. Awareness that even in times of uncertainty, guidance exists. Even in times of challenge, solutions are forming. Gratitude does not ignore difficulty. It transcends it. Florence Scovel Shinn believed that when a person chooses gratitude consistently, they activate one of the highest spiritual laws, the law of increase. Whatever you appreciate, appreciates. Whatever you nurture with your attention grows. Gratitude turns the smallest blessings into anchors of abundance and prepares the subconscious to expect more good. She encouraged people to end each day by acknowledging 3 things: something that worked, something that felt aligned, and something that brought comfort or clarity. This simple practice builds emotional momentum. And momentum, she believed, is one of the most powerful influences in the manifestation process. As her teachings spread across generations, Florence often reminded people that spiritual abundance is not reserved for the most devoted, the most disciplined, or the most spiritually advanced. It is available to anyone who is willing to shift inward. Anyone who is willing to speak new words, feel new emotions, adopt new expectations, and trust inner guidance. She believed that the universe never holds prosperity hostage. The only requirement is agreement. Agreement between your desire, your belief, and your identity. And now, as we reach the end of this journey together, I want to invite you into something simple, meaningful, and quietly powerful. If what you've heard today has touched you in any way, if it sparked clarity, comfort, or curiosity, I want to gently ask you to subscribe to the channel. Not out of obligation, not because it's something everyone says, but because this space is built for people like you. People who are exploring, expanding, awakening, and wanting to live life from a place of truth rather than fear. Subscribing isn't just clicking a button. It's choosing to keep this conversation alive in your life. It's choosing to stay close to teachings that remind you of who you really are and what you are capable of. And you are capable of so much more than you've ever imagined. And I want to hear from you, sincerely. Share a moment when you felt supported in an unexpected way. It doesn't need to be dramatic. It could be a small blessing, a surprising insight, a peaceful feeling that arrived at the perfect moment, or a situation in which life guided you when you didn't know what to do. These stories strengthen the entire community. They remind others that divine provision is not theory. It is lived experience. If you prefer, simply share one sentence about what you learned from today's message, or how Florence Scovel Shinn's wisdom speaks to you personally. Your voice matters here. As you move forward, I want you to carry this truth with you. Prosperity is not outside of you. It begins in you. Every thought of trust opens a door. Every affirmation spoken with feeling shapes the unseen. Every moment of gratitude brightens your path. Every step you take in faith creates space for abundance to meet you. I believe in your ability to shift. I believe in your connection to infinite supply. And I believe that life is already preparing blessings you have not yet imagined. Your prosperity is not a question. It is a process already in motion. All you need to do now is receive.